You can't expect me to block my ex. We're still friends, Harlan. That's a completely unreasonable ask. I watch her mouth move. She's performing outrage. Hands up, voice climbing, shoulders back. And I recognize the architecture of it the way I recognize a forged provenance certificate. The tells are the same. Too much gesture, not enough stillness. Then be friends, I say. 2 words. Flat as a balance sheet. Sloane stares at me. She expected volume. She expected the argument she'd scripted, the one where I escalate and she gets to play the reasonable one. I don't give it to her. I pick up my coffee cup, rinse it in the sink, set it upside down on the drying rack with the same care I'd give a Ming Dynasty tea bowl, and walk upstairs. The hallway photographs come down one at a time. Our wedding. Cabo, 2019. The Christmas Sloane's parents visited and everyone pretended to enjoy the turkey. I don't smash them. I stack them face down in the hall closet, one on top of the other, careful with the frames. Sloane appears in the doorway halfway through. She watches me take down the last one, the candid from the Ashford Wren Spring Gala, both of us laughing at something neither of us can probably remember. And she says nothing. That's when I know she knows. She goes to bed. I go to the study, lock the door, and sit in the dark for about 40 seconds. Then I turn on the desk lamp, the single one, the old brass one that throws a stripe of yellow light across the surface, and I open the bottom drawer. The manila envelope is already there. Has been for 6 weeks. Paper cold, slightly damp at the corner from the one time I'd pulled it out in a bathroom. I don't open it tonight, I just look at it. Here's the thing about working in cultural property authentication for 18 years. You develop a specific relationship with evidence. You learn to sit with a document before you act on it. You learn that patience is not passivity. Patience is the thing you do while you're building the cage. I close the drawer, lock it, go to bed. I don't sleep. The next morning, I'm driving to the lab. I have a panel authentication in Midtown, a supposed Egon Schiele that 3 separate collectors want verified. When a panel van runs the red at 54th and clips my rear quarter panel. The impact spins me into the curb. My coffee hits the dash. The world goes sideways and then stops. I sit for 30 seconds, hands on the wheel, steady. Then I pull out my phone and photograph the damage before I call anyone. The dent, the van's plate, the skid mark, the timestamp on the photos. The habit of documentation is older than the marriage by about 12 years. The van driver's a kid, 22 maybe, shaking and apologetic. I get his insurance. I call a tow. I take a cab to the lab and I'm only 11 minutes late. The Sheila is a fake, by the way. Good one. But the zinc white in the ground layer is a post-1940 formulation. Whoever made it knew what they were doing. They just didn't know what I know. The bloodwork results arrive by secure message at 2:17 p.m. I sit in the lab with my reading glasses on, and I look at the flagged line for a long time. The strain is specific, traceable. My hands don't shake. I print the result, fold it once, slide it into a fresh manila envelope, paper cold, the corner slightly damp from where I licked the seal, and write the letter H on the tab in my own handwriting. I file it in the locked drawer under the first one. Then I call Fitz. Fitz Calloway has been my accountant for 11 years. He's 52 years old, built like a man who was once athletic and stopped caring about it, and he speaks in the same cadence whether he's discussing a tax shelter or a death in the family. Measured, precise. A pause after every clause, like he's checking his own arithmetic in real time. Fitz, I say, I need to restructure. A pause. Personal or business? Both. Another pause. The kind that means he already knows which direction this is going. How long do you want? Long enough to do it right. Okay, he says. Just that. I hang up and look at the study. Really look at it, maybe for the first time. The framed authentication certificates on the wall. The locked case in the corner that holds 3 passports. One American, one issued through a Liechtenstein holding company. One that I will not describe here. The contact list on the desktop, encrypted, that includes a Geneva freight broker named Albrecht, a Beirut gallery director named Nassim, and a Sao Paulo cultural attaché who owes me a significant favor from 2018. The Ashford Wren Country Club knows me as Sloane's pleasant, forgettable husband, the man who shoots 87 and smiles about it, the man who refills glasses and asks about children's names and never dominates a conversation. Albrecht knows me as the man who made a disputed Flemish altarpiece disappear from a Basel estate and reappear with clean provenance in a private collection in Singapore. Nassim knows me as the man who talked a client's associate down from a provenance dispute that had escalated to the point where a weapon was on the table. I am not who Sloane thinks I am. I have been not who she thinks for longer than she's been not who I thought. Fitz calls back at 11 p.m. I've been watching her accounts for 8 months, he says. I was waiting for you to ask. I set the phone down on the desk and look at the locked drawer. The brass lamp throws its stripe of yellow light across the surface. 8 months. I'd been counting since March. Fitz had been counting longer. I pick the phone back up. Send me the framework. Already drafted in, he says. Good night, Harlan. I sit there for a while after he hangs up. The club smell drifts through the open window, not from the club itself, we're 4 miles away, but from memory. Lemon oil and bourbon residue and carpet that has absorbed 30 years of other people's secrets. I'd been breathing that smell at charity dinners for 6 years and mistaking it for home. It isn't home. It never was. I turn off the lamp and go to check on Mara. She's asleep on her side, one arm around the stuffed elephant she calls Gerald. She's 6, and she has Sloane's coloring, the dark hair, the particular curve of the jaw that catches light at a specific angle. I stand in the doorway for longer than I intend to. Then I go back to the study and pull out a legal pad, and I start writing down what I need. Not what I feel, what I need. The difference is the whole thing. 3 weeks later, Mara hands me a crayon portrait at breakfast. That's you, Daddy, she says, pointing at the blue figure with the rectangular head and the small, precise hands. She's drawn me at a desk. There's a yellow stripe across the top of the paper that I recognize, after a moment, as the desk lamp. She's been watching me work, the jaw in the portrait, the angle of it, the way she's rendered the line from ear to chin, catches the morning light in a way that makes me set my coffee down. I look at the portrait for a long time. Then I call Fitz and ask about asset timelines, not divorce filings. The difference matters. A divorce filing is a starting gun. An asset timeline is a foundation. You pour the foundation before you announce the building. 18 months minimum, Fitz says, to do it clean. Do it clean, I say. So here's what the next 3 years look like from the outside. Harlan Ashford, pleasant, forgettable husband, attends club brunches and charity auctions and anniversary dinners. He plays 87 on the back nine and smiles about it. He compliments Demi Hartwell's centerpieces and asks Cole about the Westchester commercial market and refills his own glass without being asked. Here's what those 3 years look like from the inside. Fitz quietly reclassifies. He relocates. He documents. The Liechtenstein Holding Company, already 3 years old, begins to breathe. The Geneva freight account, already established, begins to accumulate. Business assets that Sloane considers marital property are, on paper, not marital property. Have not been for some time, as it turns out, because the documentation predates the argument about Rowan's texts by a margin that will matter to a judge. I log every alibi. I timestamp every cover story. I keep Fitz's framework in the locked drawer, in a manila envelope, paper cold, the corner slightly damp. Gus Riley is the bartender at Ashford Wren. He's been working that bar for 19 years. He's 58 and built like a man who was once a bouncer and now prefers to let other people do the moving. He polishes glasses the way other men do crosswords, methodically, without urgency, while absorbing everything around him. One Thursday, while I'm sitting at the far end of the bar with a bourbon I'm not particularly drinking, Gus sets a clean glass on the shelf and says, without looking at me, "She told the Bryce table you were emotionally unavailable." I don't say anything. "I thought you should know what currency she's spending." I look at him. He's already moved on to the next glass. I pick up my bourbon and take a sip. "Appreciated," I say. 19 years, Gus says. "You hear things." He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. The Beirut trip happens in the second year of the 3. It's a legitimate authentication job. A private collector disputing provenance on a Byzantine icon. The kind of work I do 4 or 5 times a year that Sloane describes to her club friends as Harlan's little art hobby. The collector's associate, a man named Daoud, compact and still in the way of people who are used to being dangerous, produces a weapon during the provenance discussion. The room goes frozen. I have both hands flat on the table. I can see the icon in its case to my left. I can see Daoud's hand. I can see the door, which is not close enough to matter. I start talking. I talk about Daoud's financial exposure in the transaction. I talk about the paper trail that already exists in 3 jurisdictions. I talk about what happens to the collector's reputation, specifically, if this meeting ends in a way that requires a report. I talk about all of this in the same voice I use to discuss authentication methodology. Measured, precise, a pause after every clause. 12 sentences. Daoud puts the weapon away. I fly home the next morning. Sloane is at a spa weekend. I know this because Demi's alibi text came in at 7:14 a.m. the day before. I know Sloane is not at a spa because the cell tower data Fitz has been compiling places her phone at a hotel in White Plains. I don't tell Sloane I was in Beirut. She doesn't ask where I was. We eat dinner that Sunday and she tells me about the spa's new eucalyptus treatment. And I ask appropriate questions and we are, from the outside, a functioning marriage. I am thinking about the Beirut icon the whole time, about provenance, about the way a thing can look legitimate for years and then, under the right light, reveal the zinc white in the ground layer. The bound dossier arrives in the 3rd year. Fitz delivers it himself, which he has never done before. He sets it on my desk at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday and stands there while I look at it. Navy blue cover, white label, tab dividers, A through H. He's put a rubber band around it, which seems almost quaint. I went further than you asked on tab F, he says. I look at him. You can tell me not to file it, he says. But you should read it first. He leaves. I sit down under the desk lamp, the single one, the old brass one, throwing its stripe across the surface, and I open the dossier. 41 hotel receipts, 14 months of cell tower data. Demi's alibi, texts printed and indexed with dates and timestamps and cross-referenced against Sloane's calendar entries. A private paternity result that I had commissioned 6 months ago and not yet opened. I read it once, all of it. Tab A through Tab E without stopping. Then I close it. I sit there for a minute, then I say, to no one in particular, I expected to shoot 85, ended up with 87. The private paternity result is in Tab G. I already know what it says. I've known since I looked at Mara's jaw in the crayon portrait in the morning light at a specific angle. But knowing and reading are different things. Reading makes it a document. Documents are my specialty. I open Tab G. I read it. I close the dossier and go to Mara's school play the next morning and sit in the front row. She plays a tree. She waves her arms for leaves and looks for me in the audience, and when she finds me, she waves one arm specifically at me, breaking character, and the teacher gives her a look, and I laugh. It's the first time I've laughed in 3 months. I drive home afterward and sit in the car in the driveway for 11 minutes. Then I call Fitz. Begin, I say. Fitz responds with a clock emoji. Here's the thing about Tab F. I'll come back to it, but not yet. The Sunday before the Tuesday starts normally enough. Sloane returns from the girls' trip. Demi's text had said, Scottsdale. The cell tower said the Westchester Marriott, same as always. And she sets her bag down in the kitchen with the ease of someone who has been getting away with something for a long time and has confused that with competence. She's wearing a bracelet I haven't seen before. Georgian, probably 1780s, gold with a garnet inlay. The clasp is a specific style, a box clasp with a safety catch, that I recognize, because I authenticated a nearly identical piece for a Sotheby's consignment in 2021. I know what that bracelet costs. I know where you get that bracelet. You don't get it at a spa in Scottsdale. New bracelet, I say. She touches it with her other hand. Demi found it at an antique market. Isn't it gorgeous? Gorgeous, I say. I text Fitz that night. Begin. Clock emoji. Tuesday, 9:07 a.m. I know the process server's name is Terrence because Fitz mentioned it in the briefing. Terrence is apparently very professional, very discreet, and very punctual. He arrives at the Ashford Wren brunch room at 9:07, which is 3 minutes after the Hartwell and Bryce families have been seated, and 2 minutes before the mimosas arrive, the divorce papers, the forensic accounting motion. And this is the part that Fitz suggested and I approved after sitting with it for 48 hours. A notarized copy of Demi's alibi texts delivered to Sloan in front of the people whose opinions she has spent 6 years cultivating. Simultaneously, Fitz's paralegal contacts Cole Hartwell at his office at 9:10. Cole is a real estate attorney. He understands documents. He will understand these very quickly. At 9:45, I board the Zurich flight. I had accepted the overseas promotion 6 weeks prior. The Geneva Cultural Property Consortium had been trying to bring me on as a full-time authenticator for 2 years. I'd been declining politely. Then I called them back. The promotion is real. The timing is deliberate. I am not fleeing. I am arriving somewhere I was always supposed to be. The departure gate smells like recycled air and floor cleaner. I sit in the plastic chair at gate 14, and I think about the club bar, lemon oil, bourbon residue, carpet that absorbed 30 years of secrets, and I think about how I will not miss it. Not the smell of it, not the performance of it. I will miss Gus. That's the honest answer. My phone lights up. Sloan calling. I watch it. She calls 4 times before the gate closes. I watch the phone light up on the seat beside me and think, she still believes this is a conversation. Back at the club, according to Gus's later account, the brunch room goes very quiet when Terrence arrives. Demi reaches for her phone under the table, her physical habit, the one she's had since I've known her, checking her phone under the table like a student hiding a note, and finds a message from Cole's assistant that she doesn't understand yet, but will in about 4 minutes. Sloan reads the first page of the divorce filing. Then, she reads the notarized copy of the alibi texts. Her own name is in them. Demi's name is in them. Hotel names, dates, she's with me, girls' night, don't worry about it. Indexed, cross-referenced, notarized. The Bryce table is very still. Sloan, papers in hand, walks to the bar. Gus is already there. He's been there for 19 years. He's polishing a glass. He's always polishing a glass. It's the thing he does. And he doesn't look up when she comes in. Who knew? Sloan says. Her voice is doing something between controlled and not. Who knew about this? Who helped him? Gus sets the glass on the shelf. He picks up another one. Mrs. Ashford, I've been working this bar for 19 years. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Sloan sweeps her glass off the bar. It doesn't break. It hits the rubber mat and bounces spinning and comes to rest against the brass footrail, which is somehow worse than breaking. A broken glass is dramatic. A bounced glass is just embarrassing. Gus looks at it. Then, he picks it up, rinses it, and sets it upside down on the drying rack, with the same care I'd given my coffee cup the morning I took down the photographs. Meanwhile, in a spin class on the second floor of a fitness studio in Scarsdale, Demi Hartwell is 17 minutes into a 45-minute session when the door opens and Cole Hartwell walks in. Cole is 42, 6'2", and a real estate attorney who has spent 20 years reading documents that other people hoped he wouldn't read carefully. He has read Fitz's documents carefully. He walks to Demi's bike, takes her arm, not roughly but with the specific grip of a man who's not asking, and walks her out. 12 women watch this happen. They will remember it. They will discuss it. This is, in its own way, part of the filing. Demi calls Sloan from the parking lot. He has everything, Sloan. Cole has everything Fitz sent him. I don't know what to... Stop talking, Sloan says. Stop talking and think. There is nothing left to think about. That's the point. Rowan Vess learns his name is in the forensic filing at approximately 11 a.m. He learns it from a friend who knows a paralegal. He is 26 years old, charming in the way of people who have never been held accountable for their charm, and he does not handle this information well. He drives to my attorney's office in Midtown. He parks illegally. He walks into the lobby with a handgun in his jacket pocket. My attorney calls me at 9:38 a.m. Zurich time. I am in the hotel, bare feet on cold tile, looking at the lake. He's in the lobby, my attorney says. Security has eyes on him, but he hasn't produced it yet. We're about to call the police. Don't, I say. I'll call you back. I call back in 4 minutes. I'm coming in. Give me 30. Harlan, give me 30 minutes. I fly back on an afternoon flight. I walk into the lobby at 2:15 p.m. Rowan is sitting in one of the chairs near the reception desk, jacket on, one hand in his pocket. He looks up when I come through the door. Here's the thing about Rowan. He is the kind of person who makes decisions in the moment and then has to live in them. He drove here with a gun because he was scared, not because he was dangerous. The difference matters. I can see it in the way he's sitting, not coiled, just stuck. I walk to within 6 feet of him and stop. You drove here with that, I say, quiet, almost curious. His hand moves in his pocket. His other hand is gripping the chair arm. My name is in your filing, he says. Yes, you're ruining my career. Your career's a consequence, I say, not a target. His hand is shaking. I can see it through the jacket fabric. Mine are in my pockets, which is where I put them when I want them to stay still. Put it down, Rowan. You're not the kind of person who does this. You're the kind of person who runs. 8 seconds. I count them. On the 8th, Rowan takes the gun out of his pocket and sets it on the reception desk with a sound like a small, final punctuation mark. Then he walks out. Doesn't look at me. I take a handkerchief from my breast pocket. I carry one, have since my father insisted on it. One of the few things he insisted on that I kept. And I pick up the gun and hand it to the security guard. Log it, I say. The security guard, who is 24 and has never had a morning like this, nods very seriously and writes something down. I notice, as I hand it over, that Rowan has left the safety on. He drove here with the safety on. I file this away as evidence for my earlier assessment of his character and walk to the elevator. My attorney's office is on the 14th floor. She meets me at the elevator, which I appreciate. You could have let us call the police, she says. I know, I say, but then it becomes a story. She considers this. You're not wrong. Log it, I say again, meaning the whole morning, and she almost smiles. Sloan texts at 11:52 a.m., which is before I'm on the return flight. Why are you ignoring me? I send her a photo of my boarding pass. Gate 14, Zurich. Departure in 6 minutes. She calls 4 times before the gate closes. I watch the phone light up on the seat beside me. And I notice, in the specific way you notice things when you're running on no sleep and institutional coffee, and the particular clarity that comes from having done the thing you spent 3 years preparing to do, that the motivational poster above Gate 14 says, "The journey is the destination." I look at it for a second. At least one of us is inspired. Then the gate agent calls boarding, and I stand up and walk through. Zurich in October is cold in the way of places that mean it. Not performative cold. Actual cold, coming off the lake in the pre-dawn, getting into your shoes. I'm standing at the window of the hotel room at 4:30 a.m., bare feet on the tile. Cold in the specific way of hotel bathroom tile, a sensation I've come to associate with the moments between decisions. And I have the briefcase open on the bed. Tab F fits, went further than I asked. What's in Tab F is a documentation trail connecting Rowan Vest to a provenance transaction I facilitated in 2019. A transaction I facilitated and, at one specific point, obscured. The obscuring was not illegal. It was close. It was the kind of thing that exists in the space between what is permitted and what is done. And I had done it for reasons that seemed reasonable at the time, and seem less reasonable now. Fitz found it. Of course he did. He's been watching everything for longer than I asked. What Tab F contains, if filed, would not merely end Sloan financially, it would implicate Rowan criminally. It would also, if anyone looked carefully enough, raise questions about my own conduct in that transaction that I would prefer not to answer in a deposition. I sit with it for 40 minutes, looking at the lake. The water is flat and gray and not interested in my situation. Here is what I know about myself. Sitting in that room, I am not a clean man. I have made things appear where they didn't exist and disappear where they did. I have sat across tables from dangerous people and talked them down and flown home and eaten dinner and smiled at charity auctions, and none of it left visible marks. I am good at this. I have been good at it for a long time. The question is not whether I am capable of using TabF. The question is what I am doing this for. I am not doing this to punish. I am doing this to be done. The line between those two things is thinner than I'd like, and I am not certain I've been on the right side of it the entire time. The 3 years of patience, the careful architecture, the coordinated Tuesday morning, there's a version of that story where I am the wronged husband protecting his assets. There is another version where I am a man who spent 3 years building a trap for someone who hurt him and called it strategy to avoid calling it what it also was. I close TabF. I close the briefcase. I lock it. Then I go to the bathroom and run cold water over my wrists until my hands stop doing the thing they're doing, which is not shaking exactly, but close. I look at myself in the mirror for a while. You're not a serious person, I say to my reflection, testing the phrase. It's what I'd said to Sloane by phone when she'd called the hotel the first time. She'd asked what that meant. I'd said I'd explain it in the filing, but the thing about that phrase is it cuts both ways. Standing in a Zurich hotel bathroom at 4:30 a.m. with a briefcase full of leverage you've decided not to use. That is either wisdom or weakness, and you don't always know which one it is until later. I go back to bed. I don't sleep. But I go back to bed. Gus calls at 8 a.m. Zurich time. He doesn't usually call. He's a barman. He observes, but he calls. She sat at the bar for 2 hours after the papers came, he says. I'm sitting on the edge of the bed. The lake is visible through the window now properly, the gray going silver in the morning light. Demi unreachable. Rowan's number disconnected by Thursday. He moved, apparently. New city. Right, I say. She kept saying she didn't understand. A pause. She really didn't, did she? Not a question. I sit with it anyway. No, I say. She thought I was the set dressing. Another pause. The kind Gus does when he's deciding whether to say the next thing. You know what she ordered? He says. 2 hours at that bar. You know what she drank? What? Club soda, both times. A beat. First time I've seen that in 19 years. I look at the lake. Gus. Yeah, thank you for all of it. 19 years, he says. You hear things. You figure out who's worth knowing. A pause. Take care of yourself over there. He hangs up. I sit there with the phone in my hand and the lake going silver outside the window and the cold tile under my feet, and I think about Sloane sitting at the bar for 2 hours with club soda, saying she didn't understand, and I feel not satisfaction exactly. Something more complicated. Something that has Mara's crayon portrait in it and the jaw angle and the paternity result in tab G and the fact that I loved Sloane once, in the way you love a person when you're 34 and optimistic and haven't learned yet to read provenance. I put the phone down. Then I pick it up again and scroll through my messages until I find the one from Petra. I met Petra through a gallery contact in Geneva. She's a sculptor, 34, works in bronze and reclaimed industrial material, has a studio outside the city. We'd had coffee twice, the kind of coffee that is actually a conversation that happens to have coffee in it. She'd mentioned she was going to a gallery opening that Thursday. She'd written, "You should come, unless you're the kind of person who doesn't go to things." I hadn't gone. I'd been in the middle of the Tuesday preparations, but her message from 2 days ago is still on my screen. She'd been talking about a residency application, a values assessment the program required, questions about what you'd made and why, and what you'd lost and what you'd kept. She'd mentioned that a friend had described a similar process on singletune.com. It asked what I'd survived, she'd written. Not what I looked like, before you talk to anyone, before you see a face. Just, what have you been through, and what do you believe about it now? I set the phone down. The values compatibility concept sits in the room with me for a while. It's exactly the category my marriage never occupied. Sloan and I had been compatible on surface. The club, the dinners, the particular social frequency of Westchester money, and incompatible at the level that matters. The level where you say what you actually believe about things and find out whether the person across from you is real. I don't sign up for anything. I'm not ready for that. But I sit with it, and it feels like something opening, which is different from something closing, and different from what I've been feeling for 3 years. I text Petra back, "Still in Zurich. When's the next opening?" She replies in 4 minutes. "Saturday. Are you the kind of person who goes to things?" I look at that for a second. "Working on it," I type back. The consequence delivery continues without me, which is the point. I designed it to run on its own. Demi's alibi role is now public record in the forensic motion. The Bryce table, the social nucleus of Sloane's world, the table whose opinions she has spent 6 years managing, stops returning her calls by the following week. Demi shows up at my attorney's office demanding the alibi texts be sealed. My attorney calls me. I'm in Zurich, looking at the lake, which I'm beginning to think of as a companion. "Put her through," I say. "You built a case against my marriage," Demi says. Her voice is doing the thing it does. The thing I've watched it do at club events for 6 years, the slightly too fast laugh, the pitch that goes up at the end of sentences that aren't questions. It's not doing that now. It's flat. She's been crying and she's stopped. "You built it," I say. "I just filed it." A silence. "Cole is—" She stops. Starts again. "You don't understand what you've done to us." "I understand exactly what I've done," I say. "You provided 41 cover stories over 14 months. You made a decision every single time. I documented it." Another silence. "She's my best friend," Demi says. "I know," I say. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" "I have more to say," I say, "but not to you." I hear the door of the attorney's office slam through the phone. My attorney texts me. "She cried in the elevator." I text back, "Log it." Then I sit with it for a minute. Because Demi is a secondary casualty in a war she chose to enlist in. And that's true. And it's also true that she has a marriage that is now in pieces, and a social position that is now rubble, and a best friend who's now sitting alone at a bar, drinking club soda, and I did that. I set that in motion. I aimed at Sloane, and the shrapnel was always going to reach Demi. I knew that. I accounted for it. I filed it anyway. I sit with that. Cole files for divorce 2 weeks later. He sends me a professional courtesy email, attorney to involved party, which is an unusual thing to do, but Cole is an unusual man. It says, "I want you to know I had no knowledge of my wife's role in this. I'm sorry for what was done to you." I read it twice. Then I write back, "Acknowledged. I'm sorry for the collateral. I mean it." I send it. The return flight, the real return flight, not the emergency Rowan trip, is on a Thursday. I don't tell Sloane I'm coming back. I have a meeting with my attorney about the next phase of the filing, and then I need to go to Mara's school for a parent-teacher conference that I have not missed and will not miss. Sloane learns my flight number from somewhere, probably the travel account that she still has access to, which I have left accessible deliberately, because there is one more scene, and I need her to be in it. She's at arrivals when I come through the doors. She's brought 2 women from the club, Petra Bryce and someone I don't recognize, and she's standing in the center of the terminal with the specific posture of a woman who has rehearsed this, chin up, shoulders back, performing the wronged wife for witnesses she has brought herself. I walk out of the terminal, I see her, I change nothing about my pace. "You owe me an explanation," she says, loud enough for the witnesses. I stop, 6 feet from her, the same distance I stood from Rowan. 41 hotel receipts, I say, quiet. 14 months. Petra Bryce goes very still. "I'm not having this conversation here," Sloane says. Her voice drops. "I know," I say. "That's why I'm not having it." I walk past her to the car I've arranged. The driver opens the door. I get in. Sloane follows to the curb. She's not performing now. The witnesses are behind her, and she doesn't care about them anymore, which tells me something about how scared she is. "Harlan." Her voice is different. The performance is gone. Harlan, Mara has a parent-teacher conference Thursday, I say. I'll be there. That's not what I know what you meant, I say. The answer is she's fine. She will be fine. I will make sure of it. Sloane's hand is on the car door. She's wearing the Georgian bracelet. The garnet catches the terminal light. I didn't think you'd actually leave, she says. I look at her. Really look at her. Maybe for the last time in the way I used to. Trying to find the person I thought I married. The one I built 6 years around. I know, I say. That's the thing about set dressing. You don't expect it to have anywhere to go. I pull the door closed. The car pulls out of the arrivals lane. I don't look back. I don't need to look back to know she's standing there, on the curb, in the terminal light, with the Georgian bracelet and the 2 witnesses in the performance that ran out of audience. That's the walk. That's the whole walk. Not a driveway. A departure terminal, which is, when you think about it, more honest. A driveway implies you're leaving a home. A terminal implies you are always going somewhere. I go to the parent-teacher conference on Thursday. Mara's teacher is a young woman named Ms. Ferrara, who has the specific energy of someone who loves her job without being naive about it. She shows me Mara's portfolio, drawings, a small clay figure, a collage made from magazine pages. The drawings are all of people. Mara draws people the way I authenticate objects, with attention to the specific, the defining detail, the jaw angle, the hands. She's very observant, Ms. Ferrara says. She notices things other kids don't. I know, I say. She drew a portrait of you last week. It's on the wall. She points. I look. Blue figure, rectangular head, small, precise hands. Yellow stripe at the top that I recognize as the desk lamp. It's the same portrait Mara gave me at breakfast, months ago, but larger. She's been working on it. The jaw angle in this version is different from the crayon one. It's more precise. She's gotten better. And looking at it now, with the paternity result in tab G sitting in my memory, I see what I've been looking at every morning and not letting myself fully see. The jaw in the portrait is mine, not Sloane's, not the angle I'd been dreading. Mine. I stand in front of the portrait for a moment. Ms. Ferrara is saying something about Mara's reading level. I hear it. I also hear, underneath it, the sound of 3 years of architecture settling into a different shape. Not the shape I built it for, but a shape I can live in. Tab G said what it said. I read it, and I closed it, and I have not reopened it. But standing in a first-grade classroom in the afternoon light, looking at a crayon portrait of myself drawn by a 6-year-old who inherited my jaw and my habit of precise observation, I think, there are some documents you file and some documents you burn and some documents you simply never open again. I drove home from the school with Mara in the back seat, talking about Ms. Ferrara's classroom hamster, whose name is apparently Brigadier, and who had escaped his enclosure twice this month. Mara has opinions about Brigadier's escape methodology. They are detailed and considered. Maybe he just wanted to see what was outside, she says. Maybe, I say. Did you ever want to see what was outside? She asks. I look at her in the rearview mirror. She's looking out the window. The afternoon light catches the line of her jaw. Yes, I say, I went. Is it good? She asks. I think about the Zurich lake going silver in the morning. About Petra's message, are you the kind of person who goes to things? About the gallery on Saturday, which I have said I will attend. About the manila envelope in the locked drawer, which I will take out one more time and then file in a different drawer. Not the locked one, the ordinary one, the one that doesn't need a key. It's getting better, I say. Mara nods, satisfied with this, and goes back to her theories about Brigadier. I drive. The road is ordinary. The light is ordinary. My hands are steady on the wheel. The sealed manila envelope, when I take it out that night, is still paper cold. The corner is no longer slightly damp. It dried out somewhere in the 3 years. I open it for the first time since I sealed it. The lab sheet is inside, the flagged line still flagged. The timestamp still reading 2:17 p.m. on a day that feels like it belongs to a different man. I hold it for a moment. Then I put it in the shredder. Not because it doesn't matter, because it's done its work. Evidence serves a purpose, and then you release it. You don't carry it around to remind yourself of what happened. You carry what you learned. What I learned, patience is not passivity. Documentation is not obsession. Quiet is not weakness. And the difference between punishment and completion is something you have to decide, alone, in a Zurich hotel room at 4:30 a.m., with cold tile under your feet and a briefcase full of things you could do but won't. I close the shredder. I turn off the desk lamp, the single one, the old brass one. The stripe of light goes out. I sit in the dark for a moment. It's a different dark than the one I sat in the night I took down the photographs. That dark was waiting. This one is just quiet. I go to bed. In the morning, I'm going to a gallery.